So welcome to our beautiful university, Leiden University, and actually we're here at campus The Hague. On behalf of the entire Leiden University community, I would like to welcome you both. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here and engage with students, not only from Leiden University, but from various universities across the Netherlands. 10 of the students here are in fact Canadian, and over 100 students from Canada are studying at Leiden at the moment. We hold exchange agreements with over 10 major Canadian universities, which adds to the great diversity and the mix of 123 nationalities which we have at our university. Well, without further ado, I think it's good to enter the dialogue. I'm sure our students will appreciate this rare opportunity tremendously. The enthusiasm for this was overwhelming, and I hope that the afternoon will be as enjoyable for you. So let's get things started. Hajar, over to you.
Yes, can we have one big round of applause for Hester Bell, Director of the University of Leiden. Yes, thank you. Now, welcome Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Rutte. Yeah, it's good. Oh, you remember. That's a good sign.
Was it?
Wow, yeah. Did you remember, or did you have some good pre-research from your people?
I remember that we gossiped during some of the speeches.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We close look into that room. We will be engaging in dialogue with the Prime Ministers through the questions that you guys can ask here, but also through the questions that will be posed in the live stream online. My name is Hajar Koubi. I'm 21 years old. I'm a student here in the Netherlands as well, but I'm above all a very happy moderator because I'm very pleased to see that many people. And I'm very excited for all the sharp questions that you guys will be asking. Now, I am also a firm believer that the best sessions are the most interactive ones, which is why I'm also going to ask you, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Rutte, if you can really keep your answers as succinct as possible, as short as possible. I know it can be hard.
We can do that.
Are you sure?
Yeah. We should almost say, yes, we can, but that would be some other country reference. Now.
Well, in that meet you create everything, but of course there is one pebble in the shoe. It's a big pebble in the shoe. Is that these guys are organizing the soccer World Games, the football World Games in 26, and we have to make sure that it will be completely orange in Canada in 26. But we first, of course, have to make sure that we get there. But this is a big issue. This is really a big issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can hear.
But we survived it. We survived it.
Okay, and then Mr. Trudeau, you agree? It's the orange.
Listen, I'm not going to comment on sports because there is no upside for a politician. If you say yay for your home team, everyone else who's not there says, oh, that's bad. If you say yay for anyone else's team, your home team gets...
Cycle, we both leading the teams. Well, as long as the voters want us in these positions, of course, and otherwise our successors. And then to have a more structured dialogue between Canada and the Netherlands, because together on the world stage, we can really have an impact because we agree on so many issues. So then the question will be not to convince each other, but how collectively, like in Rome the next couple of days in the G20, and then of course in the COP26 in Glasgow, how to work together on convincing others to step up what we think is necessary.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. And if it's just sports that you disagree on, that's a good thing to hear. But we're not just going to be talking about sports because, we're in the Hague. I already mentioned it's the International City of Peace and Justice. So I think there's no better moment as well to talk about some topics related to peace, security, human rights. So, let's just hop right into it. Is there somebody who wants to ask a question related to that? Yeah?
Yes, hello. My name is Rosa, and we all like to live in an inclusive and gender-friendly world. As Canada has a feminist approach to its foreign policy, I was wondering whether PM Trudeau could give some advice to Rutte on how the Netherlands can also maybe increase its approach regarding feminist foreign policy.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for the kind words about Canada. We're very proud about what we've been able to do on gender equality. I brought in 2015 our first gender-balanced cabinet to make legislation around pay equity and transparency that's hopefully going to start making a difference over the coming years, but it's a slow process. We also all saw, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that when we tell everyone to stay home, to stay safe, and home is not a safe place to be because of domestic violence, there is a huge amount of work still to do, and we're facing that in Canada and elsewhere around the world. So being a feminist isn't about saying everything's great. On the contrary, it's about saying there's lots more work to do and staying focused on it and working with allies to share what we're doing well and learn from them on the things that we need to do even better. So there's lots for us to exchange on that.
Yeah, you agree, Mr.
Yeah, I could completely agree, but it's true that Canada really is on the forefront here, and you rightly posed the question. And one of the issues we are working on is on this, that we are both intervening in the Gambia versus Myanmar court case at the International Court of Justice. And one of the focus areas is also women's rights. And indeed, also during the UN conference week, I spoke, and Justin also raised the issue at other occasions of this issue of domestic violence because of Corona, COVID-19. Yeah. People staying at home, and in many cases, women being at the receiving end of violence, which is terrible, and which we have not really realized when this was happening.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you, Rosa, for asking the question. Somebody else who wants to go for the next question? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. My name is Hong Chen. My question is, the world is in turmoil also geopolitically right now, so I'm just wondering, like, in your opinion, how strong the transatlantic relationship at this moment? Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I mean, one of the things we were talking about, Mark and I, is the fact that there is so many shifts in the world, even in traditional alliances. You know, with the U.S. going through its moment over the past 4 years, but also, you know, trying to figure out where it fits in now. With Brexit over on this side of the pond, there are a lot of different things, and of course, the rise of Asia and China, particularly as a geopolitical pole, means that friends should really not just say across the way, oh yeah, we agree with each other, that's good, and then turn to see who else we can get to agree with. We should actually be pulling together more and working together strategically on bringing others along. And that's really what this visit has been about, preparing strategically a little bit of the things that we're going to be pushing on as like-minded partners, along with others, at the G20, especially at COP26 in Glasgow. There are big issues that we need to deal with, and one of the things that we've seen around the world is, you know, there's that old expression of, you know, countries don't have friends, they only have interests. At one point we have to realize that even though I'm sure we could have competitions about whether Canadian cheese is better than Dutch cheese, and that would be very heated and much more disagreements than sports. You know, at one point we have to realize, even though, yes, we're both market economies that want to compete with each other, and that's important for our economies to do well, we also have to realize that we should be allied and aligned in so many big fundamental issues where there are countries around the world not playing by the same rules, either the international rules-based order or labor standards or environmental standards or trade standards. And if those countries are able to get us more focused on trying to compete over cheese rather than, than actually working together to hold stronger standards around the world, then I think maybe we're missing an opportunity and giving other people advantages that we shouldn't be. So yes, there's always needs to be friendly competition to keep us on our toes. But we need to be focused on working together to bring the world to a better place. And that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And here, what I started to understand when the US, in the detail for the last 4 or 5 years, changed its approach to, for example, NATO, its bilateral relations. And we need to do that in a coordinated manner. And there is one worry on the other side of the Atlantic, which is this whole concept of strategic autonomy. And what I explained today also to Justin is that for us here, open strategic autonomy is not that we distance ourselves from that transatlantic relationship. No, and we are very proud of the fact that we would support as a country. That is sometimes difficult because we are hosting the institution itself. So that could sometimes provide a difficult situation. But the case of Gambia versus Myanmar, where we both intervene, shows that it is still possible also for us to be active also on that side.
Yeah.
But I think, and yes, absolutely to all of that, But at the same time, we have to remember that we're in a time right now where confidence in international institutions of any types is weakening. And that's one of the concerns that we should all have in countries where reason gets to dominate, trust in science, trust in undercutting people's confidence in the competence of institutions to actually look out for the big picture and look out for them. And that is a path that leads to real challenges for the world. So, when you have populist politicians stoking up divisions and fears and pretending that it is a zero-sum game, that, oh, no, in order for us to do well, they have to do poorly, so let's knock them down and we'll put our country first, actually is a race to the bottom. But it's a very compelling sounding race to the bottom. It's very convincing. Ooh, there's a storm. Let's just hunker down with our little clan, with our family unit, with our tribe, and wait for it to blow over. Well, that leads to all of us facing challenges separately and in difficult situations. It's harder to get out there and figure out how to make concessions and compromise and figure out a way forward that includes everyone. But that's the issue that we are facing in the world right now. That's where your voices, learning from each other, getting out there in the world, these are the things we need to be pushing on. And this is the reflection that we have that will determine what the end of the 21st century looks like. Were we able to figure out how to get along, or are we going to continue to pick fights over narrow interests, not thinking about the big picture or long term? And that's why I'm so glad to be here and part of Hague Talks, because these are the conversations that are so important for the coming generations.
Yeah, and maybe touching on that, Mr. Trudeau, because indeed when we talk about disinformation, but also international cooperation, which is super fundamental for, as you called, seeing the bigger picture of certain things, I think there's no more fitting topic than perhaps the climate crisis that we're in right now that totally fits that urgency that I think especially a lot of young people feel as well. You both will be attending COP26 next week. Will we be traveling together or separately? Can we have like a big orange-red train, something that will go to Glasgow?
I don't think our flights are aligned. No,
oh gosh, guys, come on.
Sorry. I know. We all have schedules and people traveling with us that fill our planes, I'm sure.
Okay, maybe next time.
Yeah, that's the explanation.
Yeah. Maybe it's like the fighting over which cheese platters will be placed inside. But of course, well, you will be going there and you will be speaking about the climate crisis. So looking into the hall, is there somebody who wants to ask a question related to that? Yes, I see one there in the back.
Hi, thank you very much for being here today. My name is Josephine, and in light of the COP26 in Glasgow next week, young people are worried that there will be more talking and no action. My question today is therefore, which actions will we see from Canada and the Netherlands to fulfill their commitments to the Paris Agreement?
A lot in terms of fighting climate change. Every year at a COP, we won the fossil fuel award because we weren't leading on climate change. So when we got elected in 2015, I made a commitment to bring in a price on pollution. I made a commitment to meet and surpass those climate targets put forward by previous governments. And not only are we now on a concrete plan to surpass to 36% below, we've actually committed a plan to get to 40 to 45% below 2005 levels, which isn't as high as some other countries, but I would argue that we've actually done the work to show that we can get there, including with one of the most ambitious, broad-based carbon prices in the world. We have a price on pollution in Canada that people have pointed out, if the rest of the world were to adopt just the same level of pricing that Canada has, we'd be below 2% easy without doing anything else. So we're doing our part, but there's so much more to do because Canada, every country has its own different challenges. Canada is a significant producer of oil and gas. And we have to do a lot of work to, first of all, decarbonize our processes now while the world still needs oil and gas, but also prepare for a world that doesn't rely on oil and gas because we have to get there to net zero. And that's why, for example, we made the commitment that I'll be repeating on Monday or Tuesday at COP, that we are going to place an absolute ceiling where it is right now on emissions from the oil and gas sector and start decreasing them to net zero. And it seems obvious that it's something we need to do, but it's not obvious for people working in communities reliant on oil and gas extraction. It's not obvious for a sector of our economy that represents 20% of Canada's exports. We're going to do it. We are going to reach net zero. We are going to reach our targets. We are going to figure out ways to transform our energy mix and decarbonize. But it takes an awful lot of work. And while we do that, we need to be making sure that other countries around the world are matching that level of ambition given their own contexts. And that means countries in the global south need resources and capital from wealthy northern countries that have, contributed so much to greenhouse gas emissions of decades past. So that's where doubling our climate pledge, for example, is a significant part, and working with allies to make sure we're getting to that $100 billion that we promised way back in 2015 as a world that we haven't yet delivered. There's a lot of work to do, and both Mark and I and others will be pushing hard on climate change in the coming weeks, which is a reminder to everyone that yes, every country can do more. Absolutely. But those countries that are already doing lots are the ones who are democracies that are getting criticized by their citizens for not doing enough, while other countries that have more authoritarian models don't have to deal with that kind of criticism. Now, I don't envy them for a second, because those are not places we need to be. But we need to figure out as a world how to put the right kind of pressure on those countries that are producing goods that we buy and rely on for our quality of life every single day without living up to the kinds of expectations that you are expecting for each of your own countries as young voters. And it's that attitude shift that we're really needing to reflect on how to bring about. And I'm not complaining for a second that young people in Canada are constantly marching in the streets to tell me to do more. I need that. I need that to be able to push back against the industries that are trying to do less even in Canada. But we also have to know that it's a big problem that we all have to be pushing on everywhere around the world, and not everyone is feeling the same kind of pressure that, quite rightly, Mark and I get every time we face our electorate.
But maybe, Mr. Trudeau, if I could ask, do you think it's also not in a way more about which question you prioritize? And maybe Mr. Rutte would like to respond to that as well. Maybe just a show of hands. Can I see who's born after 1990? Okay, I see no hands here, but a lot of hands in the room. Because indeed, you mentioned there's a big part of it is the export of our country, and of course there are jobs linked to it. But isn't it the priority of which question you ask? What are the consequences of not doing enough in time? Because we know that if we do not reach that, preferably 1.5 degrees, and if not possible, the 2 degrees, that we're going to put into motion these tipping points, these climate tipping points, which we will not be able to, reverse in a way. And isn't that a higher priority than perhaps, taking it easy on how we reshape our economy for that transition that we make? I see, Mr. Rutte, you're taking the mic.
I'll just answer quickly, and then I'll turn to, in a democracy, people decide who the government is.
Yes.
And the contest in Canada in the last election wasn't between me and another party that wanted to do more to fight climate change. It was against me. You need to bring citizens along with you. But the more citizens, broad-based, push on their governments to go faster, the more we can go faster.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mark.
Mr. Rutte?
Yeah, well, he's right. And particularly where he started. That targets are the easy part. Still, in Europe, for us, it helps that we collectively agree to move to 55%. And why is that? Because you won't have carbon leakage if others do more than we, or we do more than others. That you make sure that your economies relatively stay competitive because the others have the same target. So in that sense, targets help, but that's only the start. And in this country, we need to do much more than we are doing. Yesterday and the day before, we had 2 days of talks for the new team we are trying to bring together for the government. And a big part, basically the whole Thursday, was spent on this issue, how to tackle climate change. But, and here I would disagree a little bit with the second intervention, yes, it is true that the economy should not stay on a carbon footprint, that we have to make that transition in terms of how we have in energy, in our overall economy. But if we are not able, at the same time, to make the transition in a way by investing in innovation and research development, that we create new jobs and therefore new prosperity, creating a clean country, where you have jobs coming out of that new economy. And my prediction is that in 2030, out of 10 million jobs in this country, 1 to 2 million will be in this area. And maybe we cannot even think of what type of jobs that we exactly will envisage by 2028, 2029. But that will happen. And that will create, again, the economic growth which is necessary to again invest. And the fact that the Netherlands is coming out of Corona with almost the lowest unemployment in recent history, an extremely healthy state finances, etc., makes it possible now for us to invest potentially tens of billions of euros in this energy and climate transition. So economy matters, but of course not as in the old economy, but creating and building that new economy whilst also achieving those targets. And there was a profound insight Justin shared with me in that first tete-a-tete we had this afternoon. Yes, it is getting to the targets. Yes, it is about creating a new economy, but there is also an issue of values there. What type of society we want to be. And of course there is a particular worry within the EU that in terms of values, and look at those countries where the values are now contested, those are also the countries who are lagging behind in terms of settling for the high ambitions. So there is a connection there, and we need to tackle that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rutte. Do we have another question in the room? Yes?
Good evening, Prime Ministers. My name is Madison Maloney, and I'm wondering, since the effects of climate change are not bound by borders, responsibility impacted. Thank you.
Maybe for the sake.
What you mean? So other countries who are not fulfilling their obligations, you mean?
Like the effects of the climate change, how they're disproportionately impacting countries, whether they're the ones that aren't necessarily contributing as much to the climate crisis are being more impacted.
Yes, but that's exactly, I think, what you also already alluded to, that we have to make sure, and that on the one hand has to do with the climate financing, so to help poorer countries to be able also to make the climate transition. That's the famous 100 billion pledge. And I think we are now currently at 78 billion, and we should have been at 100 billion already. So that is a very practical, but still a very also fundamental issue of making sure that the money is there for those parts of the world. At the same time, we see big developing economies at this moment still opening up coal-fired power plants. And sometimes even exporting those coal-fired power plants to other parts of the world. And if we cannot settle on those issues and come to an agreement, people will find it increasingly difficult to understand why in Canada and the Netherlands we are working on this issue. Yes, we still have to do that, because I want to live in a clean country which is modern and forward-looking, but then collectively as a world we are not getting there. I think that's the conundrum we have to solve.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we're developing solutions around energy generation that we can then sell at competitively economic prices to those countries if they're willing to spend, X, millions of dollars on a new coal plant? Can we offer them the same price, but for a hydroelectric plant or a solar plant or wind turbines? Right now, they're all more expensive than the cheapest coal plants you can buy. People need to be able to turn on the lights. They need to be able to work. They need to be able to access the internet. But if we don't provide affordable solutions, they will go in the wrong direction. And the other thing to reflect on is it is very much in our self-interest in the North to ensure that countries in the South, even though they are more vulnerable to climate change, don't get vulnerable to climate change. Because for all the refugees we've seen from wars, for all the refugees we've seen because of economic collapse and failed states, That's nothing compared to what we face
Yeah.
in terms of climate refugees over the coming decades if we don't get the climate crisis under control and keep us under 1.5 degrees.
Yeah, really touching on the human rights link, I think, to it as well. I want to go on to a next point because we have Adam over here, and Adam has been very thoroughly checking all the questions coming in from the live stream. Adam, is there an interesting one you want to pose?
Oh, many questions are coming in indeed, and this one is quite interesting actually. It's about the impact of the private sector in mitigating climate change. It's substantial, of course. Are you optimistic about the collaboration of governments, NGOs, and the private sector on the issue of climate change?
Mr. Trudeau, if you would like to start.
Yes, I think not am I optimistic about it. That's the only way to move forward. Governments can't do it all. I mean, there's lots governments can do, but we need, first of all, civil society and NGOs to continue to push governments and to demand change and to, quite frankly, do a better job perhaps than they are doing now of connecting with and educating people as to why it's important to bring in a price on pollution. You know, we had an attempt at a price on pollution in Canada in 2008, but it was easily vilified, and the NGOs didn't do, looking back, as good a job as they could of supporting my political party that I wasn't yet a part of, or that I was just beginning to be a part of, in pushing a price on pollution that we then had to wait another 7 years before bringing in. But the big one is in the private sector. There is so much money to be made in green, clean technologies, not just because they can be more efficient, not just because governments are increasingly bringing in prices on pollution and ensuring that there are costs to not doing the right thing, but because consumers and customers around the world are increasingly demanding better outcomes. Companies like Apple, for example, have figured out that investing in Canadian aluminum, for example, there's this new technology called ELYSIS in Quebec, where, first of all, our aluminum is all powered by hydroelectricity, not coal plants, so that's already zero emissions, but the process itself will be zero emissions. People know that if you can sell a smartphone or a car even that is, you know, zero emission metal, there's a lot of people willing to buy that rather than something else, or even perhaps willing to pay a little bit more to get something that's better for the environment. The private sector knows that, and consumers can help drive that. And what government needs to do is both make sure the rules are there so that private sector does internalize its external costs, but also that there's a fair competitive playing ground, that a company that's doing all the right things, trying to manufacture things out of Canada, isn't undercut every single day by countries in other parts of the world allowing the shoddiest manufacturing and the lowest labor standards, but that provide a product that, for your average consumer, looks just as good, but actually carries with it a lot more pollution internally. We all have to be smarter around that, and those are conversations that can't just happen at the government level.
Okay, Mr. Rutte, I see you nodding. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. But just quickly, I think
We agree on everything, right?
yeah, here I agree. No, there are, I think, three ways. One is, and Justin is also talking about that, companies who are innovative at the forefront, who will create new jobs, the 1 to 2 million I was mentioning just a second ago. Second way how companies can work, can help. In the Netherlands, we have 11. The 11 biggest industrial companies in the Netherlands are responsible for about 1/3 of the total CO2 emissions. Companies like Tata, the big metaal, hoe dat? Steel plant, steel plant in Noord-Holland, to Yara, to Sabic, Dow Chemical, etc. You don't want to lose those jobs. So the second way how these companies can help and how we can help the companies is to build the green hydrogen backbone so that it's possible for them to still produce those products, because we still need them over the next 10, 15 years. And of course, steel will always, I think, be part of our economy somehow, but in a way that it is CO2 emissions neutral. That's possible, but we have to invest there, maybe from the government side, but also from the company side. The third one is the most sensitive. Big oil. Big oil is in a game of making sure that they can survive in the long term without the oil and gas, etc. So they have to make the transition.
Yeah.
And in the Netherlands we have Shell, another country BP and Exxon Mobil, etc. If we are able, and we are discussing this with companies like Shell, to make sure that they are part, and they want to be part of that energy transition, the collective power they have in terms of money, research, development, but also the pure necessity to survive in a changing world is huge and can be a positive force if we are able to work on this together, and I think we could. So sometimes big oil is said, well, they should go and there is no future for them. I'm not sure. I think you need them in terms of creating that energy transition, creating all the collective research, brain power and money in those companies to make that happen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rutte. I see some signs in the back that we are going a bit through the time. But I want to turn to the audience because, you know, it's not every day that you're sitting in the same room as the President of Canada and the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. So is there somebody who wants to get them a bit sweaty, maybe a difficult question, something you've always wanted to ask them? Somebody in the room who wants to? Over there, yeah?
Hi, my name is Ida Di Miranda. I'm from Sweden. Because I'm studying a master's in crisis and security management, I'm wondering, following the pandemic, a lot of people are fearing or having a lot of insecurities right now. I'm wondering, what is one thing that you hope that societies and governments take with them following the pandemic?
Good point. Mr. Trudeau?
Great question. One of the reasons Canada made it through the pandemic better than many other countries is because Canadians really were there for each other. I mean, and this was the reality throughout. When crisis hit, neighbors helped out neighbors. We all stayed home to support our frontline health workers. People actually listened to government when we said stay home. We got income supports out to people.
I see that. I see Mr. Rutte.
We had a slightly better pandemic than you did, I think. Well, I mean, no. There is no such thing as a better pandemic. We lost, close to 30,000 people, and it was a real everyone, heartbreak and loss. But Canadians really pulled together. But at the same time, we're seeing right now that this wave we're in right now are communities who chose not to get vaccinated, people who are believing in the disinformation, in the misinformation, sharing anti-science facts online, that is highlighting for me a problem that goes beyond just dealing with the pandemic, is a problem of, we used to have political debates where we'd agree on the facts, we'd disagree on the way to interpret them or the best way to respond to them. Well, we're beginning to get into a world where there isn't even agreement on the basic facts. And when that is the reality, it's really hard to have functioning democracies. So I think one of the big things that we have to reflect on coming through this pandemic, particularly recognizing that there aren't just 2 or 3 newspapers that give everyone the same news anymore. There is a limitless amount of information that's being accessed online, sometimes in very nefarious algorithms. We need to start tackling how we all actually come together to agree on the way forward based on shared approaches, shared understanding, and hopefully shared values, despite all the diversity of perspectives and backgrounds in every one of our societies. That's the big challenge that I'm struggling with right now.
Clear point. Ms. Rutte, I saw some weird head movements just now. What was going on over there?
Well, this country is, of course, they don't immediately do what I say. That's probably the difference with Canada. We are, but that's also what I like about the Netherlands. We are not just accepting what the government tells you, but Justin is right. If facts become opinions, your fact is also just an opinion, then we have a problem. And I think what we try to do here, and I saw you doing the same in Canada and others in Europe and in other parts of the world, is give people the facts. Give people the facts and then tell them that based on those facts, it is our reasonable opinion, having weighed all the evidence, that we should do the A, B and C.
Yeah.
But what I liked so much, despite all the troubles we went through and the many people who died and all the sorrow, is exactly the point Justin made, that people started more than usually to look out for each other, to care. We became a somewhat kinder society. And I still see that. And I hope we will keep that. Not just looking out for yourself, but that you live in connection with others, and that you have to make sure that everybody is well off, is being able to take the next step, and if people are in trouble, that you just spend time with them and help them.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want anyone to think that Canadians actually listen to everything I say. That's, we're a democracy like everyone else.
Yeah, right.
They
It's
listen
a
to
bit
the doctors
healthy.
quite well, though.
Yes.
But here it is more difficult than normal.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe a little bit. Another question. Somebody who wants to ask, maybe from that side.
Hi, my name is Alex. Honored to meet you. My question is, if not in politics, what other careers would you have liked to pursue?
Ooh.
Hey, what are we going to do in
After
2040?
you get off.
I got into politics, well, my father was Prime Minister many years ago, which from 1968 to 1984, Prime Minister of Canada. And I was 13 when he left politics. And the one thing I knew was I never wanted to be Prime Minister. But I did learn from him the impact that one should have in life, that the goal in life and the purpose was to have a positive impact on the community around you. And I looked at myself as I went through school, and I decided the best way to do that would be to become a teacher. And I became a school teacher. I taught mostly high school for a number of years, and that was my way of having an impact on the world. And then I got into various types of environmental activism and youth activism, and partially because of my last name, I sort of got dragged towards politics. And then I suddenly realized that what I'd learned as a school teacher, what I'd learned as an activist, were things that could lead me into politics in a totally different way than my father's path into politics was. So, you know, kids either grow up wanting to be like their parents or wanting to be the exact opposite of their parents, and sometimes both at the same time. For me, realizing that I could perhaps pursue this path in politics and have it be my own path, and not a carbon copy of me trying to fulfill what my father's path was incredibly liberating for me, and actually allowed me to stay grounded in who I was and not other people's expectations of. But being a teacher, for me, was and is the way I tend to interact with the world. Not because a teacher has all the answers and gives them to the students. That's actually a bad teacher that does that. A good teacher is focused on empowering their students, and a good politician should be focused on giving their citizens, their communities, their country, all the tools to them create their success in the best possible way. And that tends to be slightly different than the top-down intellectual approach my father took. But it's an approach that I think is perhaps better suited to the 21st century than approaches past.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. And it's actually really interesting because, Mr. Rutte, you are also a teacher still,
yes,
right?
This becomes boring because again,
it's the same
because
answer.
again we agree. I'm still teaching, but of course not for pay, but just as a hobby. 2 hours a week on Thursday mornings in a school, in an inner city school in The Hague, with many children who are now, most of them have a Dutch passport, were originally from Morocco, Turkey, or other migrant immigrant countries coming to the Netherlands in the 70s, 80s. And what I love about doing that is two things. First of all, the traditional teaching is that you have knowledge which you can then help others also to get and to become better, in my case, history as a profession. But secondly, there is, I believe, that issue which has been now named the meritocracy trap. And that you can still, what I always thought as a liberal, you bring people to the starting position and then the race is for them. And we, by creating good schools, have to make sure that everybody can get to the starting position. But I'm afraid this is a bit more complicated than that. Because the sort of talks you have had at home, the sort of network you get from your parents, from your family, etc., that can be so different that that starting position, despite both having the best sort of education, can still be very different.
Yeah.
And also to somehow help in making smaller that meritocracy trap. Also something we discussed the last couple of days, trying to create this new government team. That schools, yes, have to make sure that we teach all the basics, but also having to make sure that people have the same sort of opportunities, and that it is more than just good teaching, but also this issue. And I would love for a couple of years to spend full time and maybe get some pay out of it.
Yeah.
The problem is I didn't have that background, so I studied history, but I'm not a trained teacher,
yeah.
so that means that I have to get to Leiden University
Sit
one night
in the
a week.
hall. Okay,
but
I see.
I can do that
Mr.
whilst at the
Mr.
same
Bell.
time getting a pay from the school. So in that sense, I will survive.
I see something happening here. I think there's going to be like an application with Mark Rutte wanting to study here.
No rush. The world still needs him as Prime Minister for a number more years.
Oh my God, yeah, maybe you could do like a swap with the student. You take their seat as a student and they take your seat as a Prime Minister. Could be an option.
You wouldn't happen to have a student in mind, would you?
Oh, maybe can we see some hands who wants to swap places with Mark? No one? Oh, I see more hands.
Notice her hand went up first.
They know that the workload is big. Okay, maybe, do we have another question from somebody yes? Over there? To either Mr. Rutte or Mr. Trudeau.
Good afternoon, Prime Ministers. Thanks for doing this. Sort of similarly in terms of careers, since most of us are young in this audience, what advice would you give for the young, budding politicians and statesmen that are hoping to follow in your footsteps?
Yes. Before you answer, I just wanted to say this is the last question because I see that we are almost out of time. So if you also want to get some final remarks in there, go ahead.
A summary of the debate.
Yeah, of the entire day, right?
Of course, of the entire day. Now, for a politician, first thing you need to have a view. Politics, yes, of course, is getting on television, giving speeches and all that. And if you hate getting on television or delivering a speech, probably, and debating, politics is not for you. But it is so much more than getting on television, debating and delivering speeches. It starts with views, opinions, something you are very much irritated about. I will probably, I told a journalist the other day, write letters to the Telegraaf or the Volkskrant, being very angry about how things are going in this country. And the great thing about politics is that, of course, only to a certain extent, because this country, of course, is very difficult to govern. But still, when you are a politician, you can do a little bit more with all those irritations, views, and also hopes you have for the country than we are not in politics. But it starts with an opinion. Sometimes you want to change. If you think everything is great, don't go into politics. Okay.
I'm not sure I agree with that, Mark.
Ooh, we have something besides.
We had such a nice afternoon together.
I know, I got to ruin it.
You have to go now.
It's not enough just to have strong opinions to go into politics. I know that's not what you were saying. It's about the core values you have. Because in politics, you're going to be faced with a whole bunch of really difficult decisions that seem very reasonable, all the various outcomes. And all you get to do is fall back on your core values. What really matters? What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to stand for? Your core values, who you are, what you stand for, what you're willing to fight for, is essential. And if you don't have that core, you will be knocked around, chewed up, and spat out in politics really quickly by people who have very specific agendas that they can pursue single-mindedly while you're trying to deal with 1,000 different things at once that are all incredibly important to very, very different people across your constituencies and across your country if you get to be Prime Minister. So your ability to know what you're fighting for and what principles and values you're not willing to compromise on. I mean, I always find that one of the most interesting things about politics for citizens is not a politician who lists all the things on which they agree, because quite frankly, citizens are getting pretty good at saying, okay, they'll say anything to get elected. They're carefully focus grouping it. They're carefully going it. What I always look for is those places where I can stand up on 2 feet, look at people and say, I disagree with you. I think you're wrong. And this is why I think you're wrong. This is why you're free to disagree with my position, but this is my position. I'm taking it, I'm standing on it, and I'm going forward on that. And just so you know, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this issue. But if you see me pushing back on you on something that really matters to me, where we disagree, you will be reassured that on the things we do agree on, man, oh man, am I going to fight for you? Am I going to go to the wall for those things that we do agree on that does really matter? And that's reassuring for citizens to see. And it's what democracy is supposed to be all about. You don't pick the person you agree with 100%. If you agree with someone 100%, there's something wrong. Someone's lying somewhere. What you need to do is pick people who share your values, your approach to solving problems. When we got elected last time, nobody knew there was going to be a pandemic. But the values we got elected on, each of us, of looking out for each other, of trusting science, of believing in a better future and being willing to roll up our sleeves and work hard to fight for it, well, that served in a pandemic. Because the next crisis is not something you vote on. So, as a budding politician, get to know your core and figure out whether or not whether you're good at being on TV or not, figure out whether or not people are willing to follow you. Figure out whether or not people are willing to look to you to solve a challenge in your class, in your school, in your community. Can you bring people together to get something done? That's the basis in politics. Don't say, I want to go into politics, so I have to study political science. That's useful. I have lots of staffers who studied political science. I never studied political science. I studied English literature. I studied education. I studied engineering. I studied things that interested me, that helped give me tools to have an impact on the world. So don't feel that because you're going to be a doctor or because you're studying to be a scientist, that you don't have a path that leads you into politics. We need more doctors and scientists and teachers and non-lawyers and businessmen in politics. So whatever your path is, if you're anchored in it, if you're passionate about it, if you can bring other people along with you and fight for it, then you got a future in politics.
Nice.
I guess that's my wrap-up right there.
Thank you.
Too.
Can we have a round of applause for that? Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Mr. Rutte, you want to...
Just summing up, no, not trying to sum up the debate, but just that was a beautiful closure to this debate.
Yeah.
And in Europe, we are going to say goodbye to Angela Merkel, who is leaving after 16 years as Chancellor of Germany. And she is a very special leader. But hey guys, here's another one. So, thanks for visiting. Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah.
And it was very inspiring. And we'll be back.
Yeah. And good luck to you guys next week with all the work. We'll see each other again. Thank you. Thank you so much. To all the students, thank you also so much for being here, for asking your questions, engaging with us. Also to our online audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We want to thank Canada, the Netherlands, but also Leiden University for facilitating us here and letting us have this incredible session. I want to thank you for your honesty and beautiful words, and all the best of luck. Those core values you mentioned, we hope to see it back in all the work that you do, and then we wish you the best of luck with the G20 and COP26. Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Rutte. Thank you so much, Mr. Rutte. See you later. Goodbye. Bye-bye.